AI has been a hot term today, although I'm really glad that we covered a lot of other topics outside of just the hot technology of moment, which is great. But I do, like many of you, I do think that this technology is going to refactor many industries, and it's going to impact the way not only we work, but also the businesses that we build. What I thought would be interesting is, when Zach asked me to share some thoughts that might be of interest to you, is to actually look at my own industry. So, I'm in the creativity and marketing world, and I oversee a big part of our product engineering and design organization at Adobe. And we're always thinking about the next generation of creative and marketing products. And so I've spent a lot of my time. I also run strategy for the company and M&A for the company. I spend a lot of time with companies out there that are building in this space. And I thought it would be interesting to summarize the 5 waves of change that I think are actually happening right now as a result of this new technology, with the hopes that maybe you will find some language or some proxies in the industries that you're all in. And I also think that in some ways, all of us are in the business of marketing and creativity if we're all telling a story, about the businesses that we're building and trying to get out there in the world. So I think that, hopefully some of this will be useful to you. No doubt, this is a new age of creativity and personalized digital experiences that are going to change everything. And I'll explain to you what I mean more by personalized in a minute. But I want to just jump right in. I'm going to go through 5 waves of change and some of the implications, and see if you have any thoughts before I hand it over to actually have an interview after this. So the first being creativity is the new productivity. So what do I mean by this? I mean that if you think about it, for the history of humankind, it's all been about productivity. We got promoted based on our productivity, how many things we achieved, how many things we got done, how many stones we collected on a farm, how many things we prepared in a supermarket, whatever the case might be. Now you have this new world where so much of productivity is offloaded to compute, right? And a lot of the things that we used to do through productivity tools are going to be done for us. And then that begs the question, what are we going to do with these newfound cycles that we have? And so I would argue that actually creativity is the new productivity, because it's going to be how we stand out in the future. If we stood out more for our productivity in the past, creativity will be more how we stand out in the future. There's this author named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, this researcher on creativity. He wrote this very famous book that was just very boldly titled Creativity. But the whole idea of the book is it's about seeking this state of flow. And what gets in the flow, in the way of flow, is friction. And what is friction? Friction is the workflow, the stuff that you have to do in order to express ideas and get them out there. And so a lot of the work is actually being reduced. And it's an interesting kind of insight of the return of flow, the ability for us to have less friction in terms of our ideas and actually expressing them. So perhaps this means that while companies like Microsoft and others have deployed productivity tools throughout every company to make people more productive in the future, in the past, maybe the name of the game will be to deploy more creativity oriented tools throughout an organization. Why? Because instead of just giving your report, you're going to have to make infographics that take your data to tell a story that maybe a picture is worth 1,000 words. I think I also subscribe to the idea that a prototype is worth 100 meetings. If you can sometimes show the insights that you have as opposed to tell them, you can get everyone aligned very quickly. But I think in every function of an organization, HR, legal, finance, being able to tell a story is ultimately how you are going to stand out and how you make an impact, and you have to have the tools to do so. So that's wave number 1. Real quickly, kind of obvious that the shift here in this wave is really standing out through your creativity as opposed to your productivity. So number 2 is interesting to me. This idea that creative confidence is growing. I would venture to say that all of us were most creatively confident when we were 6 years old, because everything we drew got put on a refrigerator, right? And every idea that we express, we were told, oh, that's wonderful. Why don't you go do that? Oh, there's a wonderful drawing. I love what you're doing. And then what do we realize? We realize that there are these people called critics and skeptics. We realize that other people have more skills than we do, and we recoil. And many of us stop drawing beyond the age of 8 or 9. And unfortunately, a lot of us apathy or atrophy when it comes to creativity. Well, what if that were to change? And that's what we're starting to see with some of these new technologies, right? It started with these template-based technologies, products like Canva and Adobe Express and others. And now it's become all these AI-assisted technologies that have prompt-driven creativity, where you can then suddenly have an idea and express whatever's in your mind's eye. So obviously we're playing with a lot of this. We're starting to see adoption of creative tools, obviously by non-creatives, but more importantly, for non-creative tasks, things that we typically didn't think were making a finance report or making an HR email, instead of making an email, making it an animated video. A lot of people have better ideas of the ways to do the things they do. They just don't have the confidence to do it. And what if this technology can actually boost that confidence is a really exciting value prop. So what will this world look like? It's going to look like a world where people can discover content to edit and share, very readily, that people can feel creatively capable of making compelling content. It also means that whatever skills you do have creatively, in my world, our customers have always defined themselves as either a designer or a photographer or an illustrator or an animator. Now they're being increasingly asked by their customers to make mixed media content, because what is on TikTok and Instagram and Snap and everything else? It's actually all mixed content, as opposed to the original Facebook, which was just photos. And so they need to have those skills beyond their own category, what they were taught in school. And so they also have to become more creatively confident across all the categories of creativity. So there's this resurgence of creative confidence in humanity, and for creative professionals in particular, that I think is really important that this technology is enabling. And that's why that second wave of change is that creative confidence is going up. What are the implications here? Well, instead of always trying to find someone with skills to tell our story, we're going to be able to tell our own story. Instead of feeling segment constrained by the things you've always done, you're going to start to feel imagination constrained. And by the way, that also goes to other functions in an organization. A lot of these new tools in every function are being reimagined right now as multiplayer tools. So if you're in a financial planning organization, the new tools you're using allow other people, other stakeholders to participate. So again, everyone's starting to feel less constrained by the segment that they work within. And then the third piece here being really interesting is that instead of creative tools being very exclusive and being skills that we almost wear as a badge of honor because of how complicated these products are to use, if we know them, we're really proud of ourselves. Now they're becoming somewhat democratized. Well, that brings us to this third wave. And also brings me to the response that I'm oftentimes giving to our creative professionals that are like, okay, Scott, this sounds interesting, creativity, I want everyone to be able to be creative, but what does that mean to me as a creative professional? Like, what about my career? Am I going to still be hired? Am I going to still put bread on the table? What are the implications for me if creativity is democratized? That sort of sounds good, but actually for me, it doesn't, right? And that's a common question that I get, which leads to this third wave of change here, which is that the opportunity for creative exploration is also expanding and exploding. So what do I mean? What do I mean by this? Well, when I go and I sit down with creative professionals and I ask them how they come up with their best ideas, it is simply a function of the time that they are given to explore the solution to a problem. If you commission a brand agency to come up with a new brand, they will come back to you with 3 ideas, typically that came from the 7 that they came up with. They'll pick the best 3. But if you gave them 3 more months, they would explore 30 or 300 variations and come back with the best 3. So it's a function of time. Every creative professional is in a fight against time to explore this full surface area of possibility to find the best solutions. So now you have these new technologies where instead of actually having to mask and create layers and all these sort of painstaking things that I would have normally had to do, I can just start to use generative AI to start to explore variations of all of these different things. We have integrated a set of models that we call Firefly into our products. They were all trained on licensed content. So whereas other models went out and scraped the internet and violate IP right and left because they're trained on just everything, we only trained on content that we licensed and compensated the contributor for. And then we use those models to be able to, thank you. And we use those models to then, there's some advantages certainly in us doing the right thing. There's advantages also in market and selling commercially safe models. There's actually, it turns out, also advantages in the quality, of what models are capable of when you have a controlled data set. But when we've integrated these capabilities into our products, what we've seen is our customers, our pros, basically doing hop, skips, and jumps through the creative process to explore a far more surface area of possibility to find better solutions. Here's a quick example I figured I'd share with you. This is something that I shared with a group of illustrators that use Adobe Illustrator all day to make packaging design. And they are incredible vector artists. They just spend hours, if not days or weeks, making these incredible designs, whether it's for packaging or for posters or for whatever else. But what they also always have to do at the end of their process is figure out the color palettes. Now, in order to substitute in a different color palette for your work, you would normally have to actually manually take color palettes and reapply it. But now you can just type in winter and see winter. You can just type in spring and see spring. You can just type in sort of neon spray paint and totally change the entire creation that you've spent weeks making instantly into other color variations. And so we were doing this focus group, sharing this technology, and this woman in the focus group who was an illustrator for a big brand that does a lot of packaging design, for like cosmetics and stuff, started to tear. And she was basically like, I can't explain how much of my life has just been substituting color palettes. Like, she just could not believe that she would no longer have to do all this medial, repetitive work when she could actually spend her time on the art itself and also on picking the ideas as opposed to implementing them in such a tedious way. And so that was like an unlock for me a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, she's going to find better solutions to her customer internally, her internal customer in this case, the better solutions to the problems by getting all these cycles back in her day. I thought that was very interesting. So now what I'm trying to work on with the teams is I'm saying, hey, we have to bring our customers beyond the prompt era of AI. We want to kill the prompt era. We think it is, in some ways, bastardizing creativity. It's marginalizing the impact that a creator can have. We want to bring people into what we're calling the controls era. And the controls era is when you use the new technology, which is AI, but you give people all sorts of levers and controls to really start to accomplish what they have in their mind's eye. And so a few examples that we're starting to put in the market, one's called structure reference, where you can actually start to pick a structure that you want to reference, but now we've actually created a 3D modeling software, something that we call Project Neo, where you can make an exact model of something and then use it to create a new asset with generative AI. And so it's like such an incredible level of precision for someone to get what they actually want out of the technology. We've launched generative video, but with generative video, we're also launching new capabilities. One's called character consistency, where you identify a character that you want to keep consistent, and then you can keep it existent, throughout a story or frame by frame, and a whole suite of capabilities that are all sort of the control levers for generative video. Something that we call custom models. So this is also interesting, where we take our base model, Firefly, commercially safe, only trained on licensed content, and then we go to these other brands and say, hey, if you want to take all of your SpongeBob SquarePants content that you own, that you've created, and put that into the model and have a variation that only you can use, the SpongeBob SquarePants Firefly model, you can do that. And so what they're doing is they're using that not only to create like interesting marketing collateral of the moment, think and act in real-time social media marketing type stuff, but they're also using it for character exploration. They're using it for generating ideas on mood boards and stuff like that. And again, creatives who are using this technology now, especially in the private betas that we have ongoing, they're all coming back being like, I'm coming up with so many better ideas because I have so many more cycles to explore more ideas and pick the best ones. And so that's the theme here, right? Is that this world where we lived in this limited time for discovery of the best ideas, we now have 100x or more cycles of discovery to start to play and discover and see them. Instead of this limited surface of exploration, there's really just so many more possibilities that are emerging as a result of this. So in some weird way, what the second wave of making creativity more accessible, making us more creatively confident, what that's done is it's lowered the floor. So all these people that never even dared to touch a creative tool, like salespeople or social media teams, knowledge workers, people in finance, legal, HR, they're suddenly using these tools to express ideas and to tell stories, and it's really exciting. What we're also, though, realizing is that we're raising the ceiling because all of these professionals that were always constrained by the cycles that they had to work within to solve problems now have this huge unlock. Sometimes I also get this pushback now where people are like, yeah, okay, But if your creatives are going to become so much more productive, creative professionals, doesn't that mean you're going to hire fewer creative professionals? So I hired some economists, and we embarked on research around this question. We started, first of all, with the engineering space. Engineering has gotten more productive every decade for the last 2 or 3 decades, and yet we keep hiring more and more and more engineers. Why is it? So the TLDR on this is that the ROI on an engineer has also gone up. And when you can get more out of an individual person, unless you are a penny-pinching private equity-owned company, you typically want more of those people. Why? Because they want to do more markets, they want to do more tests, they want to do more products, they want to do more variations of product. Oh, let's translate that marketing if we can. Oh, let's take that in-house. Let's, and the growing list continues. And the same thing is happening with creative pros. By not having to do all this mundane, repetitive stuff, they are being tasked with more ideas, more regions, more campaigns, more stories, more market, more. And I think that's why the ceiling going up for them is also really important. What I've also observed is that the time our customers are spending in the products is actually also changing. So they used to spend a lot of their time in this refine and finish zone, people toiling away in Photoshop or Illustrator or Premiere Pro and trying to get something exactly right. And what we've observed is that their time is starting to shift upstream to this like explore, exploit generation, brainstorming, mood boarding phase. And it turns out that this was actually oftentimes the part they liked the most, was getting inspiration and coming up with themes, but they never felt permission to spend time in it because they had to save all their time for the execution. And so it's interesting to see that time shift. And we're actually building some new products now that are actually made for that brainstorming, mood boarding in the age of AI part of the phase of discovery. All right, fourth wave of change. Fourth wave of change is an implication of the 2 that we just went through. You're going to get 100x more participants because we're all more creatively confident, and you're going to get 100x more possibilities because the ceiling has gone up and we can explore far more surface area to find the best solutions to problems. And so when you put all this together, you get some math here that suggests that we have a world ahead of us that is full of far more engaging and personalized digital experiences than we can even imagine. Imagine every website welcoming you by name and only showing you stuff that is relevant to what might be matched well with things you already have in your closet. I mean, the fact that we go to a website today and it asks us our gender and it shows us stuff that isn't in our size and it treats us like a stranger is pretty weird. And this kind of sort of triggers one of my cardinal beliefs in great technology, which is that I think that really great technology brings us back to the way things once were, but with some degree of scale and efficiency. And I would argue that we all, until maybe a few hundred years ago, humanity was always known. Like wherever we went, we were in small towns, we were recognized by people on the streets, the butcher remembered our favorite cut, people knew our kids' names, like everything was sort of in a very personalized world until the Industrial Revolution and the growth of cities and the world became, especially in the digital world, became where we're all anonymous and we're all treated like strangers. And the only way for a brand to know us is to sort of, secretly get data around us, And so maybe we're getting to a world where it can be far more personalized. And that's this fourth wave here, a future of a far more personalized digital future. Where we actually, just like we've always longed to be known, I think we still do long to be known. We just want to know how we're known. And I think that we can start to have that experience with brands that we actually are customers of. Now, here's an example of this company that many of you know, Carvana. They decided last year to send 1 million videos out to one to each of their customers that bought a car. And this video starts with the street sign of their hometown, features the car, the make, and the color of the car that they actually bought, and addresses them by name and thanks them for starting their car journey with Carvana. People loved it. People felt like it was obviously marketing, but people felt like it was marketing that was made for them, and so they actually watched it. I don't think people had watched a generic Carvana video. Every digital experience, I think, is going to become a conversation where we are going to go to brands. They're going to welcome us back. They're going to have very long context windows where they're going to remember our past inquiries and purchasing experiences and likes and dislikes. And I think that's going to have a huge impact. And so, the shifts here are we're going from this world of generalized experiences that is basically all we've known for the most part to a world of really personalized experiences. We're going from a world where we would always have to search to find something to a world where we basically just have a conversation and get proactive suggestions for things we might not even know we're looking for. I think we're going from a world where we've always had to learn an application. In my career, I've always been the onboarding guy. I've always helped people with first mile experiences and tool tips and helping someone learn how to use a product and make a product more accessible. I will become useless because an app is going to learn you. Instead of you having to learn an app, the app's going to meet you where you are. It's going to progressively disclose all the capabilities as and when you need them. And it's going to have this chat-like interface that you can use to even avoid learning how to use the product altogether. I think that's happening sooner than we think. I also, remember not too many years ago, saying every organization needs to be a data-driven organization. I don't even think that's true anymore. I think you have to be an AI-driven organization. You don't need to know where the data is per se. You don't need to even access it. You don't even necessarily need a data analyst to go and mine it and tell you things. You just need to have AI that has access to all of it and can have a conversation with you to end up understanding what the data tells you. That's what an AI-driven organization does, is it decentralizes the idea of getting insights on what's happening. So you don't have to always go to the same person who has that secret window that tells you what's actually happening. All right, so let me now play devil's advocate here. The negative aspect of what I just said, of the world becoming hyper-personalized, of everyone being able to produce content at scale, is that we're about to be inundated by content like we've never seen before. Every brand is going to flood the zone, right? And it's going to be absolutely wild. We're going to start getting videos like the Carvana one from every brand. We're going to be welcomed back by everything. Everyone's going to suddenly know us. I mean, that is sort of, there will be some sensations that are positive, but there will also be a little bit discombobulating. And so what happens when anything becomes commoditized is that we end up as humans seeking the more scarce and special version of something with a story, right? When shoes become commoditized, you want to buy nicer shoes. When cars become commoditized, people want to buy a special car in a color that they love. Like, that's typically the way things work. And I actually don't think it's much different in this new world ahead of us. I think that as a result of all of this, we as humans are going to crave story, craft, and meaning more than ever before. And if you think about what makes art special, if you go to a gallery, they're not going to tell you the cost of the oil and the canvas. They're going to tell you the story of the artist, right? And what they went through and what their influences were. And that is going to develop the value that you accrue, to this piece of art and story. This is a friend of mine, a guy named Casey Neistat, who's also based in New York City. He's a big vlogger. He does these big YouTube videos that kids especially love. And he did an experiment in the earlier days of generative AI. He went to ChatGPT and he said, make a script, word for word, scene by scene, of what Casey Neistat would do in New York City. And then he decides to go out and film this video, word by word, scene by scene, and which is a thing he would typically do in New York. And he puts this video up on YouTube. And it's really weird because it kind of looks like something he would do. But there are moments, like there's one moment where he's like, this is a place where I always come to get inspired, and really think about life or whatever. And then all you see is an escalator going down. There are a few moments like that. There's just something missing, and you're trying to put your finger on it the whole time as the viewer. And then he turns to the video at the end. Of course, no one knew that he had, how he did this video. He turns to the viewer at the end. He's like, listen, this is the worst video I ever made in my life. And he explains how he made it. And he's like, I'm not sure why it's so bad, because it's actually based on everything I've done or would do, but it just lacked soul. That's the way he described it. It just had no soul. And I've been thinking a lot about what that means. What is it about the artifacts of humanity, if you will, that we put into the work that we do, the traumas, the everything else that we've all gone through that shows up in interesting, weird ways in the work that we put out into the world. But he clearly realized it. I have another friend who's a photographer, who has actually changed his craft to start to incorporate artifacts of humanity, as I like to call them. In this case, he's actually showing the negatives because he's trying to show the process that went into the work. He's trying to reveal the story, right? In a world where he feels content will start having no story. I think that's an interesting trend as well. There's also this question that I want to address around the concerns of this content being generated by machines and whether we can trust it or not. And I feel like the new version of trust but verify is going to become verify then trust. We're going to want to know the story behind a piece of work, behind an image shot by a photojournalist featured in the New York Times. And we're going to want to know the story behind what we see before we can determine whether or not we can trust it. At Adobe, one of my passion projects for the last 5 or 6 years has been something called the Content Authenticity Initiative. And so we started this as a open source, open protocol, nonprofit organization that's now known as C2PA. It's a standard, it's an open standard that we've now gotten over 3,000 partners in the industry, including Meta and Google and so it's on YouTube, Microsoft, a lot of folks have signed on now. And this is an attempt to allow people when they're making stuff to put credentials into the content that shows how it was made. And I have a small crack team in New York City that has been working under the radar, on this, and it's getting wider adoption now, and it's certainly bigger than Adobe, and it's exciting. One of the things that we've done here is every time you use Firefly in any of our products, we automatically put credentials in the asset that you made. So you know how AI was used and whether AI was used. I also think it's going to be important in the future which model was used to create something. But I think also credentials is a way of, in some ways, showing the story of a digital piece of work. And I think that's going to become more important over time. So this last wave of change here is that we're going from this world of overstimulating, flooding the zone of content, which is starting to happen right now, to a world where we're all going to have higher bars for experiences that really engage us in our lives. We're going from this world where we always are seeking scale and efficiency, especially in the digital world, to a little bit more of a meaning and scarcity driven model that I think a lot of brands are starting to think, like, what does that mean for me? And then we're going from a world where we're always engaged by content to a world that's so programmatic and algorithmic driven, and AI knows us better than we do in terms of our hot buttons. Like, AI is going to constantly try to engage us by content. And I think as humans, we're going to start to be more engaged by meaning. Which underscores something I've always believed truly, over the course of my career in the creative world, which is just that it's the creativity that is, creative is only effective, if it actually moves us. And I think that's the ultimate measure of what is art, in my mind. Thank you. All right.
How long is the time? 5 or 10 minutes tops.
Hi, thank you so much for speaking with us. I was wondering if you guys were considering using blockchain for content authenticity because the chain is immutable and you can verify that whatever happened in the chain will not be changed.
Yeah, so the way the technology works is there's actually no centralized place where the truth is. It's all embedded in the actual asset. So it's cryptographically embedded in the asset. And so it's like a manifest that actually travels with every image and asset itself. And then when it's being displayed anywhere, it's up to the person or the company or the service that's displaying it as to whether or not they want you to be able to view or inspect the credentials. So in some ways, it actually is decentralized in that sense. There are aspects of content credentials, like for identity, for example, like who made something, that we would want. There could be like a centralized service to support. And in that case, it could be a decentralized service, right? So instead of having to authenticate yourself with a company like Persona, or one of these companies that looks at your license and says you're you, and then puts that in the cryptographically inserted credentials in an image, instead it could do some sort of decentralized way of validating your identity. So there is that side of it. Oh, okay, over there, and then we'll go back. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the insightful presentation. So I'm a little confused about what the future of these businesses is going to look like let's say ChatGPT, Adobe, Canva. So they are coming up with new tools every day to enhance productivity and creativity. Like all the tools that you talked about in Adobe, like they are AI tools that are helping you increase your creativity in a way. But again, as you mentioned, people as the market is going to be flooded with content like this, people are going to look for more authenticity, which can come from only a human touch. So do you think these tools will stop being used after a point, or like how is the future of this going to look like, if my question makes sense?
Yeah, simple question. I mean, I think about it all the time as well. Like, what's the play out of this? I mean, a couple of things I would say. I think that these large mega models, if you will, these massive large language models that are being built, what's interesting is that not only are they incinerating capital from large venture capital firms that are investing in these companies, but what else is happening is that these models are all getting more powerful up and to the right, but they're also closing in on one another. So the gaps are not widening, they're narrowing. And they're also narrowing not just with the models that are running in these supercomputer clusters in the cloud, they're also narrowing with the local models that are running on people's machines, which don't cost anything to actually use because they're running locally, right? And the prices are going down. I mean, the prices of ChatGPT 4.5 are now, I think, 96% cheaper than when it was launched, and that's like a year and a half ago, right? So it is mind-boggling to me, how in some ways commoditized this industry is already becoming in terms of these massive, massive models. My bet, and we don't build LLMs at Adobe. We build media models for generative AI because we had to build them in a specific way. And we've also realized that how they integrate into our products really matters. And so some of our competitors are integrating third-party models. And so they're very limited in what they can do with like the controls era that I described. So we're kind of saying, hey, we got to build our own. But on the LLM side, I personally, I don't know if I'd want to be an investor at this stage in one of those huge models, because I think the value is going to accrue to those who use them, not necessarily those who make them. Yeah.
Scott, I really enjoyed the presentation. I saw that you're active in trying to basically have people watermark if AI is used. How optimistic are you that the Twitters of the world are actually going to adopt that? And on a related subject, I was, excuse me, really sort of scared to death about the number of deep fake videos that were going to be in the last political campaign. And I was kind of happily surprised not to see as many as I feared. But what do you think about that as well?
Yeah, well, two thoughts. First of all, we develop content credentials not to punish bad actors, but to reward good actors. So if people want to be transparent with how they made content and put the credentials on it, and by the way, even X, formerly known as Twitter, wants to support the inspection of credentials. So I don't think anyone's opposed to allowing the customer to view credentials when they're available. And in fact, we're even doing browser extensions now. So even if X doesn't support it, the browser that you're in could support it. So it's really down to us as people, right? We're going to see all this crazy stuff in the future. And we're going to see a lot of stuff that has no credentials on it. And we're going to see a lot of stuff that has credentials on it increasingly as this gets popularized. And so what we're going to start to say to ourselves, I think, or what I'm going to start to say to myself, is that when I see something that's unbelievable and has no credentials, I'm going to doubt it by default, right? And when I see something that is unbelievable or newsworthy that has credentials, I'm probably going to click and be like, wait a second, like, where did this come from? Did someone shoot this photograph, or did someone just start to edit it in Photoshop? Like, I want to know where this came from. I also think news organizations will also definitely inspect. And so I feel like that's consistent with the way humans always accommodate new technology, is we kind of adjust our settings, in our brain of, I remember the old story about the War of the Worlds on the first radio, broadcast, and like half the people thought the world was ending. But then they learned, there's this thing called fiction, and this medium is going to support it. So I am optimistic, which I admit, but I think that that's how it's going to play out. Thanks for all these great questions. Yeah. Cut me off, Zach, whenever you're ready. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you for the great points that you made. But one thing was in the last couple of months, there has been a great number of privacy policy changes and a couple platforms that they said the content of the user will be used through us to train the models. And in order to opt out, the button to opt out was buried so deep down into the platform that the artist might be like, might as well not opt out. With that said, how often does your team think about the why instead of the how? How an image is created, that is great. This model is used. These images has been like marked, and then there is a watermark for it that this has been generated. What about the why part of it? Why should this be created through other people's platform, or should we do this in the first place? Or
I mean,
is that being discussed?
I mean, we from day one, we decided that we would never, ever train our generative AI models on any user's content. Full stop. We then went and through our stock service, where we have a license for the imagery and where we can compensate, we launch a compensation model for people who would allow us to have generative AI training. And that's how we built our models. I also have a personal sort of deeply seated history here because I created a company called Behance back in 2006 in New York City that is now 56 million creatives who showcase their work online. And when I saw some of these other models out there that scraped the internet, and I saw the prompts that people were using, a lot of them were Behance members' names, and oftentimes using the word Behance in them, so it was like blatant theft of someone's style, right, without their permission or compensation. So that has always been our policy. I also am very pro-progress. There is no reason why an illustrator should have to manually apply a color palette like 100 or 1,000 times, to find the one that works when she can use technology that can do it for her. And anytime we've tried to fight technology in the past, someone was telling me recently about all the American photography associations would not let you in if you were a photographer that used a digital camera. That was not the pure thing, like that was cheating. But it even goes back further. When the camera was invented, portrait painters were deeply offended because their entire being was like their livelihood was painting families. And now this obnoxious person with a click could just like capture, their days and days of work and their whole livelihood. So is the answer to not allow cameras to be invented, or not allow digital cameras to be invented, or not allow cars to be invented? I mean, I am very pro-progress, but I think we have to do it in the right way. And we can't only be creative at what can go right. We also have to be creative at what can go wrong, which is why we do things like contra credentials and things like that. But I don't think that, I don't think we will ever train our models on content that we haven't licensed and are compensating for, because we also serve the creative professional community. And, and that's something that, it's the right thing to do.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for presenting. So my question is about like with Adobe and your role and strategy, how do you assess and weigh whether you should pursue more of like an internal venture building or like an M&A, especially when it concerns AI and other companies? Should they look more towards M&A or internal venture building to improve the AI technological capability?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, we've done a little bit of both. We Firefly and a lot of our integrations and new AI first products are all born within. Although on a couple things, we've done some acqui-hires of talent to help bolster a team, that is passionate about a particular problem. I think that as a venture investor, I'll put on my other hat for a minute. I'm very cautious because I think a lot of these AI wrapper companies, as we call them, are ultimately just building an interface around the same 3 or 4 models in the market. And there's no reason why incumbents who own workflows wouldn't just surface those capabilities, in the products where customers need them. And so I think a lot of startups are not only going to be wiped out by that activity, but also back to our earlier comment about how these big models are going to actually make money when they're becoming commoditized and the pricing's going down and the gaps of differentiation are closing. What those models are going to start doing is they're going to start going up the stack, right? So instead of just providing a model, they're going to provide a consumer product, and then they're going to provide a product for legal and a product for this and a product for that. And I think they're going to start going up to capture more margin. And as a result, they're going to start competing with the startups that use their models. So the jury's still out, but those are just some early thoughts. Yeah.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for speaking with us. With the democratization of creative tools, what new hiring requirements for creative professional, what new hiring requirements, what will they be for new creative professionals, and how will individuals with a background in the arts be able to set themselves apart? And do you foresee a generation of new creative professionals who don't have a background in the arts and those tangible art skills?
It's a great question. And I'll tell you the most important skill that I think differentiates people that are successful in the creative world is taste. Now, where does taste come from? I have no idea. What I can tell you is that these models are not good at taste, because these models are trained by whatever's in the distribution of what's been done, right? So if you prompt a tree, you're going to get a tree that is the average tree in the widest part of the distribution of assets that had trees. So you're always going to get the average of what's been done and what's been seen. And taste, by definition, is always kind of outside the distribution. It's a little bit of like something that catches your eye, that engages you. I mean, that's what art is, right? Art is something that surprises you, not reinforces or looks familiar to everything else you've ever seen. No one would want to buy the thing that was inspired by Rothko, because that's just a splotch of paint on a canvas. They want to buy the Rothko, right? So taste. Taste is going to become more important than ever before. And I think you've asked a great question, like how are people going to get career opportunity, and how are they going to get educated, right, to be successful as creative professionals? I think going to museums, all of the understanding of our history, the understanding of your own psychology, the reconciliation of your own traumas. Like I have no authority in telling you where taste comes from. I just know it's important, and I've seen that, and I have that same question. So I think that's a good place to end. Thanks again. All right.